Hello and welcome to this INHWE live presentation on leadership and management during a crisis. My name's Adam Layland and I'm going to take you through this live session. During a crisis, leaders and managers are often the people that are looked up to, and everybody kind of looks up to that heroic style of leadership that exists, and that's what we really want during a crisis. And it's where we often always try and find the answers from somebody more senior or somebody in a more powerful position than us, but it does not necessarily mean that that's right. And actually this presentation is hopefully going to give you all tips to be better leaders and managers without always having to look up as well. And crisis isn't really something new. In the UK alone, we can go back 400 years to the gunpowder plots, one of the first recorded terrorist incidents in the UK. But since then, there's been loads of ongoing crises that we've dealt with, and some of those can be small over a day, or they could be over a longer period of time, such as we're facing now with COVID-19. And at the bottom of the slide there, you can see some of the more recent virus-related crises going back over 100 years to the Spanish flu, H1N1 in 2009, Ebola only just over 5 years ago, and now COVID-19. And so crises are fairly common overall. But are we adequately prepared? How do we cope when there are multiple crises at the same time? And what stops us as humans from dealing with one crisis before the next? How do we go back into a normal way, or the new normal of what that may look like? And what's always been the problem with each of these crises? How can we learn from them, and how can we make sure that we react a lot better? This comes down to practicing the skills so that they become second nature in the way that we behave as leaders and managers. And this looks at our competence and our knowledge and our experience. And if we can take some of these tips and act these out in a normal situation when crises aren't occurring, it actually helps us to prepare better as leaders and managers. And doing that, we practice leadership and management in a much stronger sense on a day-to-day basis, so that when crises do hit, we're in a better place to deal with it, and people don't necessarily see a complete change in your style, whether that's from being quite a transformational leader to going to a very command and control, authoritative way of working. And that can often unsettle people when that happens. And so continuity of leadership and management into crisis is really, really important. And some of the techniques that I've done in my career, particularly around incident management and crisis from the ambulance service point of view, is having really simple communication. And these are some of the models that we've used in the past to support the way of communicating. And IMARCH is a way of giving a briefing to people. And this says it's about taking the information that's available. What information do you have to communicate with everybody about what's going on? And that could be about the resources you've got, the latest intelligence, the data, the research. It's what you know at that moment in time. And we know with COVID-19 that this is evolving on a daily basis, and so keeping on top of information is absolutely vital. People need to understand the intent about what we're trying to do, whether or not that's a healthcare organisation or a support organisation or any other organisation. What is that organisation's intent? What are we trying to achieve with this crisis? And the method is, how are we going to achieve that intent? What structures have we put in place to deal with it? How are we going to liaise across an organisation? What is our battle rhythm? I guess will be the military way of putting it. It's how do we achieve our intent, and what is that current strategic, tactical and operational plan to do that? Administration talks about how we are recording our decision making. How are we making sure that we're complying with working time directive for staff? How are we ensuring there's a continuity of staff throughout? And if we're thinking from a healthcare perspective, we've got shift changeover, we've got to plan shifts in the future. How are we making sure people get adequate rest breaks? How are we looking after their welfare? Where are we setting this up from? Are we having a control center, or are we having this more fluid because it's a longer period of time? And it's a clear administration on how we're tackling the crisis. As with most things, we do need to risk assess as well. And this is not only a dynamic risk assessment, but this is also about taking those risk assessments that currently exist and making sure they're fit for purpose. And again, thinking about personal protective equipment with COVID-19, this is evolving quite rapidly as well, particularly in the UK. The research that we're getting from around the world is giving the views upon what Public Health England and the NHS are saying around personal protective equipment. And it's vital that those risk assessments are current, up to date and reviewed very, very regularly. Communication is how are we actually going to communicate? What is the method of communication that we are preferring, and what's our fallback as well? It's no good to have certain people relying on emails when other people are in a Microsoft Teams or a WhatsApp group or Messenger group or something like that. And so we need to be absolutely vitally clear on how we're communicating with one another throughout the crisis. And that's entirely down to organisational preference, really. And the final one that we always add on from an incident management perspective is human rights. And it's recognising that everybody has human rights, whether that's the right to life, the right to privacy, the right to family. It's making sure that we're cognizant of everybody's human rights in the way that we're managing a crisis as well. And there's another smaller tool called the SBAR, which is often used from a briefing or a debriefing point of view, or also a handover point of view from a healthcare perspective. And this just thinks about the situation, what's occurred, what's currently going on, how did we get there, what's the assessment about what's happened, and what is our recommendation going forward. And you can combine these together within an organisation to talk to the staff and talk to partners around crisis management as well. So the Centre for Leadership has come up with some key tips which I've adapted a little bit and throw in some of my thoughts to help people to be better leaders and managers during a crisis. And it goes without saying, the first one is about seeking that credible information and avoid fake news that's out there. And information is absolutely powerful, because with the right information, we can reduce emotional distress caused by the unknown. It can diminish fear. It can give some tactical guidance, and it demonstrates to your employees that you as a leader are concerned, involved, knowledgeable, and on top of the situation that's going on. And information is not just about sharing this once. And also, you cannot assume everybody's received it, or if they did receive it, you can't assume that everybody understands it. And so it's vital that we review, repeat, and reinforce the information that we've got at the time, but keeping to the knowledge that information is changing rapidly in a crisis situation, and you need to be able to make sure you tapped into those most appropriate sources. Thinking back to my time in the NHS ambulance services, a lot of our offices had the news on at the same time, because actually certain news channels can get information really quickly, and if it's a reputable one, then at least you know it's got some credibility behind it as well. And Twitter, there's a lot of fake news on Twitter, but it can also be helpful during a crisis to understand certain things going on. It's also vital that your organisation's clear on what it's doing and what is happening. And during a crisis, time is of the essence. There's initial pressure to act, and we've seen that with COVID-19 across different organisations, and the way they've reacted to the information and the way they've reacted to what's been said by government and research as well. And so sometimes you have to start tackling a problem before you've even got a solid grasp of what is happening or what is going to happen. And if we think about COVID-19, we know that air travel got affected, working from home quite quickly, in the UK, essential workers and what that meant, and introducing the, make sure you keep 2 meters apart, and different countries around the world have adapted some of these. So I know some European countries are 1.5 meters apart. The UK is at 2 meters, and it's taking on board what we have to do in a really time limited space, but also making sure we're not changing protocols unnecessarily unless there is credible information to support that. And so with that, if you're in charge, you need to take charge. You need to be proactive and take that initiative overall about what your organization and what your team or what you want your employees to do. The next one is more challenging in being present, visible and available. But we can do this remotely, and it's been really clear in using the technology about when we are available, when we're not available. A lot of applications have status updates on, so are you available, are you busy, do not disturb. Things like that are really helpful to let your teams know if they can contact you or when they can contact you. And this is where technology kind of comes into its own around diary management as well, and people being able to see diaries or contacting you through Skype, Zoom. It's about you giving that information so that people know how to contact you. And particularly during a crisis, employees really want to hear from the leaders as often as possible. And when leaders and managers appear calm, concerned, knowledgeable, and in charge, it actually helps workers to feel more encouraged and more likely to have confidence in what's happening, because they'll recognize that things are under control and that it's going to be fine overall. And then the end of the key tip is really about dedicating organizational resources for future crisis, and what are you going to do in the future if this situation occurs again. And this comes back to the conscious competence matrix overall, and this talks us through from a state of unconscious incompetence through to a state of unconscious competence. So I'll give the analogy of driving a car here. So if you imagine as a baby, you were put into a car seat and you didn't really know what the car was about and you didn't know how it worked. You're in the unconscious incompetent stage. So you've got a lack of awareness. It's just what's happening to you. As you start to grow up, and you might go and visit a family member, so you know the car will get you to the family member, but you don't know how to drive the car. You're in the conscious incompetence stage. So you're very aware of what's going on, what the car's there for, but you just don't know how to drive it. When we start to learn to drive a car, we go into the conscious competence stage. So we're thinking about what we're doing in a step-by-step basis. So across the UK, it's mirror, signal, maneuver. We're thinking about gears, first gear, second gear, are we jumping gears? You're doing it as you are driving at the same time. So it's not an unconscious way of doing it. You are consciously thinking about, I need to look, I need to put my indicator on, I need to change gear. That is the conscious competence way. And as we develop that skill, particularly with driving, we go into the unconscious competence. So we are able to say, I don't even know how I turned up this morning. I've changed gear without thinking about it. I've signaled, I didn't even think about it. It becomes second nature, using the phrase I had earlier in the slides. That is where we need to get to from a crisis management point of view. And so to do that, relationships really matter. We need to face the emotions that we have during a crisis, and that's not just our emotions, that's other people's emotions as well. And that helps with resiliency across the group. It helps people to feel safe, and it helps people to come back to a new normal, whatever that may look like. And we know that people with an imbalanced emotional state don't process things very well at all, and that can have an impact upon work and impact upon life. And as a leader and manager, we need to be really cognizant of the fact of work-life balance, or as I like to call it, work-life integration, and understanding people so that we can get the best out of them and reduce any stress on people whilst doing the job, particularly during crisis. Showing respect is a core principle of being a leader and a manager. So, treating people with that sincere consideration and genuine concern. and actively listening, really demonstrating that we're listening and that we respond to what people are telling us. So we're not listening to reply, we're actively listening to understand more, and then we can make a considered response to what's being said later on. And making connections is about drawing on loyalty, courage, morality, and other principles with crisis response to what's important to people. So if we think about actually what is important to some people might not be the same to others, and one of the ones that's been highlighted to me over the last couple of weeks has been about parental responsibility with children and being able to homeschool at the same time as working and coming up with a process of doing that. And as a leader and a manager, we can make those connections between a work sense and a home sense, and it really encourages people to be much better in that relationship overall. And I would say one of the most difficult ones is about being positive, but this is really important because the leader's attitude is highly contagious. If leaders are hopeful and upbeat and got a can-do attitude, that spreads amongst the team, and it really drives that positivity overall. And you can probably think back to when you've been with your leader or manager, and if they're not in a positive mindset, how that makes you feel. And I certainly know that when I'm around my leaders who are in a positive mindset, it encourages me and I want to do more at the same time. There's some other things about, staying cool, looking after yourself, take one crisis at a time and think about today. Just try and tackle the today rather than tackle the future, because the information changes so quickly and we just don't know what's going to happen. So deal with that day at a time. Keep focused on the positive. So where possible, try and change those negative people into positive people. Try and deal with your negative thoughts in the way that's most best for you, whether or not that's around exercising, mindfulness, journaling. There's loads of different tools to help you with that. And also get grounded. To take your private breaks, 5 minutes, practice meditation or relaxation, or do something which helps you to keep grounded with all of that. And these activities are going to help, and they'll fit with your individual beliefs too. And prioritize and focus. So, if you are having meetings, keep them short, or if you are together rather than virtually, stand up or be more assertive in the way that you are prioritizing and focusing. Say no more often, perhaps, if you need to. But just be more conscious about managing your own time and your own priorities, and concentrate only on major issues that you can deal with there and then, thinking about that to think today, and skip any secondary tasks that can happen at a later date. And this is very much about you actually not being that heroic leader. It's the team taking on that leadership overall, and we're all leaders at a time of crisis. We shouldn't have to wait for somebody else to say do it. So take that initiative. If you're in a team, if you are in a leadership position, you can actually encourage your people to do that. And I really like the quote from Eisenhower on leadership, and it really highlights it to me with crisis leadership and management, is that it's the art of getting somebody else to do something you want done because they want to do it. And that links back with that making connections element. If people feel like they want to do it and it's the right thing and that is absolutely what leadership is about. So in summary, I guess it's we are going to be in a command and control situations at times, but once the crisis is over, you must get back to being a transformational leader, or where possible, try and keep as a transformational leader as much as possible as well during a crisis. I hope you've found that helpful, or some tips. We'd love to hear any feedback that you've got, or any other elements that you think you could add in. Please add that into the networks on the INHWE website. I've put some extra resources on this final slide for you, a mental health pilot which can help with some home working techniques, and some online courses to help working from home and managing stress as well. But I wish you the best for the rest of your day. Keep safe, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon.